Happy holidays from Austra and myself. I would like to acknowledge that we are posting this on Christmas Day. And I would also like to acknowledge that whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate or don't celebrate, you're valid. And everybody is, I guess, impacted either positively or unhelpfully over the holiday season. And today we wanted to talk about how men in particular have certain stresses put on them over the holiday season, as well as 5 ways to overcome holiday stress and overwhelm. And again, we acknowledge that wherever you are in the world, everybody has a different experience of the holidays. Again, whether that holiday for you is Christmas or just the holiday season, whether it's a different religious holiday, there are no wrong ways to feel about the holidays. Some people love the holiday because it's the only time of year where they get together with all of their friends and family, and they have amazing memories from childhood. But I acknowledge that a lot of you may not have had beautiful memories of childhood, or maybe alone over the holiday season. And the suicide rate in men goes up over the holidays. And there's a lot of pressure on men in the holiday. Like, either they feel very lonely, if they don't have family and friends and people to spend time with that celebrate them and cherish them, and they have financial pressure, spending on gifts, spending on travel if they're parents, and holiday events and New Year's parties, and all of these expenses that come up over the holidays, as well as gifts for everybody. And there's family dynamics that come up over the holidays, like you have to spend a whole dinner with your father telling you why everybody else, in the world is more successful than you, or dealing with old unresolved family conflicts. There's also a lot of time constraints if you're working and you're trying to balance work and family and the expectations of others, meeting everybody's expectations of what they want their holiday season to be. This is something that mothers and women experience as well, or people of all genders, but I think that often we don't talk about how this impacts men. And that expectation of, like, my wife wants this perfect holiday, and my kids want these gifts, and they want this experience and that experience, and it all lands on me to provide that and make sure that everyone's happy. So that can be really stressful. And I think that, again, because men are not often prioritized emotionally, that overwhelm can lead to shutting down, say, drinking more, putting a lot of extra pressure on themselves. Their health might not be as great. It's also a season where we tend to overeat. And we eat a lot of things that are unhealthy for us, which is okay. There's no shame in that. But that causes our energy levels to go down and our cortisol levels to go up. So you add all of that together in the holiday soup, and it's very understandable why some people love it and some people really struggle.
Yeah, I think it might be valuable to walk through each of them a bit more in depth and maybe give some like thoughts or solutions on each of them. And I think good place to start, because traditionally men are expected to be the providers, could be financial. And what are some of the main challenges that men might be facing, or how can they deal with that, or even communicate about having that stress?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think you nailed it, because one of our 5 ways to reduce holiday stress is communicating openly. And that's communicating your wants, needs, boundaries, and values. So another one of them that I wrote down for the 5 ways let me just tell you the 5 ways to reduce holiday suffering and stress, and then we'll go into each one. So the first one is to set boundaries and be clear about your limits with time, with money. And with this one, remember that men are allowed to have boundaries. Men are allowed to have a say. And how you communicate those boundaries is probably going to determine how well those boundaries are received. So this is how sometimes I see boundaries looking when people are learning boundaries. No, I won't do that. That's my boundary, or something, which is okay, but it's not necessarily going to be as well received from somebody as if you say, hey, I'm feeling really, and you use I statements, like I'm feeling really stressed. I feel like if I don't provide X, Y, or Z for the family, that I'm going to be letting you guys down. And here's the budget that I'm comfortable with so that I can manage our finances throughout the year, not only in the holidays. And I don't feel safe going into debt to provide things for people. And remember, at the end of the day, what we really want from the holidays is connection, right? Everybody gets together. Why do people love gifts? Because it makes them feel loved. Of course, we get that little bit of dopamine from something new and shopping too. But even that is a symptom of lack of connection. So at the end of the day, what we could do is play board games together, maybe do a craft together, watch a movie together, do a volunteer project together, sit and spend time being together. Because at the end of the day, I do sometimes work with children, and I remember being one myself. And at the end of the day, whether they can articulate that that's what they want or not, what our children and our families and our spouses and our friends, everybody in our coworkers, what people really want from us, the present that they really want is presence. Presence is the best present we can give. So when communicating your boundaries, use I statements, and don't make it about you're violating my boundaries. Make it about I feel unsafe. I feel this. Would that be okay? And using really compassionate communication. So that's first way to reduce holiday stress. Second one is focus on what matters, which we kind of talked about, experiences over material things. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be expectations for the newest iPad or whatever. But again, clearly communicating with your children as well is a good learning opportunity for them. And not just shame collapsing and making it mean that you're not man enough, or making it mean anything and then shutting down or withdrawing or lashing out. But focus on the things that you can provide. Maybe you guys do a regifting Christmas. We've done that in my family before, a regifting Christmas, or maybe everybody chips in and you buy a gift for somebody who can't afford gifts, or, there's lots of different strategies that are a good learning opportunity for your family as well. And focusing on that connection and creation rather than the material things, which I do acknowledge is an expectation. But as one of the leaders of your family and your relationship, along with your partner, it can be a good opportunity to challenge some of those paradigms and to practice connection. Because at the end of the day, people that have fond memories of Christmas, which I acknowledge, again, there's people who have not fond memories of Christmas. The people that have fond memories of Christmas, it's about like we watch this movie every year together. We have dinner together. We give each other presents so that we feel loved. It's really the core of the holiday season, whether it's Hanukkah, Christmas, Chinese New Year, whatever the holiday means to you, atheist, all of it's valid, is connection and love and feeling appreciated and feeling close. So those are things and those are gifts we can give all year round. But, and guess what? Those gifts are for free. They don't cost you anything except maybe a little bit of pride and discomfort and bravery to be vulnerable and open. So number 3 is to practice self-care. And that's making time for rest, exercise, meditation. That doesn't mean abandoning your family and making your wife do all the work, or your husband, or whatever your family dynamic is. It doesn't mean making them do all the work while you go golfing. That's not what it means. That's taking it too far. But it's about saying, whoa, I'm overwhelmed. I need 30 minutes to go meditate. Or I'm going to go spend an afternoon by myself. And tomorrow I'm going to do this cooking, and you can go shopping for the afternoon to your partner, or supporting each other in what you need. It doesn't mean practicing self-indulgence and making other people feel alone or unsupported. And number 4, communicate openly. So addressing your family tensions proactively, or just letting go of all of the egos, judgments and resentments of how other people should behave, right? A lot of us are always like, that person, every year they do this or that, and they shouldn't do this, and my uncle shouldn't get drunk, and my mother shouldn't say these things, and people shouldn't this and shouldn't that. And again, that's like writing a script for other people in our mind movie, not giving them the script, and then being annoyed that they didn't follow a script. Expect people to do whatever they're going to do, and just, that doesn't mean allow them to treat you poorly, but just let it go. People are going to be how they're going to be. And approaching that with, we've done a whole episode about that, approaching that with curiosity over expectation of like, I'm disappointed that yet again, so-and-so person behaved exactly and specifically like they always do. So it's just being open and remembering that everybody's doing their best and just letting people be who they are. And seeing if we can be the one that spread a little bit of holiday cheer. And plan ahead. So try to create, it's too late. We're releasing this on Christmas 2024. So this probably will be helpful for next year, but plan ahead, create a realistic schedule for shopping, travel, commitments, so that you're not in that last minute pressure cooking stress and increasing your cortisol levels in order to race around at the last minute and get everything done. And that'll help your parts feel safe. That'll help you spend time ahead planning and prioritizing what you do value and what's important to you. And also inquiring what's important to your family. And other than, I want a new G-Wagon and a Rolex and 75 other things, but remembering that really what all seasons are about, but especially the holiday season, is connection. And I would like to acknowledge that some of you may not have that, and some of you might feel alone on Christmas. And I just want to let you know that we see you. I've been there. I spent many Christmases completely by myself or working. And there are things that you can do. There are groups you can reach out to. There are, next year, you can do the work to create a nice relationship or some friendships, or do volunteer projects, or maybe you just really enjoy being alone. I don't mind being alone, so for me it's not a lonely thing. But being newly married now, I love the idea of spending the holidays with my husband, but I also don't mind spending alone. But I acknowledge for some people that's really painful. I just want to make sure we're acknowledging that everybody's experience of the holidays are different, and everybody's meaning behind the holiday is different, and all of you are valid, and whatever you're experiencing is valid. And Austra and I appreciate you so much, and we wish you so much love and compassion. And if you're struggling, you're taking action steps, you're watching videos like this, you're working on it, and nothing lasts forever. So yeah.
So we slightly touched when it comes to the financial, with the setting boundaries and focusing on what matters. But even as we're now pretty much like in the middle of Christmas, when it comes to planning ahead, what could be good? Because I think a lot of times it's easier to plan ahead when you have something to reflect on. So even looking back on decisions that have been made, let's say even if some of them have been bad, first of all, I think it could be a good opportunity to practice compassion. But then reflecting on those decisions, what are some of the ways men listening can reflect, or things they can keep in mind, or how can they actually practice that planning ahead for the next holiday?
Well, I think that you said it perfectly. And I am a huge fan of reflecting or contemplating, looking back and saying, what did work and what did not work? I don't think there's a such thing as bad choices. I think that there's just choices that teach us what we prefer and choices that teach us what we don't prefer. So it's not beating ourselves up. It doesn't look like, and don't beat yourself up if you are beating yourself up, just acknowledge it. You can go back and listen to some of our episodes on self-compassion and accountability. It's a balance. It's not pretending that you didn't make mistakes or blaming them on others, but it's also not about blaming yourself. It's about looking at it as information and saying, what worked, what didn't work, and coming into that clarity, because clarity feels really good in our body. And knowledge is power. And we gain knowledge by making choices and assessing the results of those choices. So you can look back at, yeah, I guess what did work and what didn't work. And then as far as future planning, if it's within a financial uh, paradigm, you can budget throughout the year. You could say, okay, here's how much I feel safe spending. Because if you are the primary breadwinner, which you may or may not be, you do get say in how much you spend. It doesn't mean you control all the money and your family doesn't get a say. That's not what it looks like. But if you want to prioritize, not running up more credit card debt or things like that, you should have that voice to have an open conversation with your family or at least your spouse or partner and say, hey, this is what I feel safe spending. And if that is more helpful for you to spread out over the year and buy things throughout the year, I know people that do that. So then it's not just like 1 month of absolute debt and chaos. So you can budget for it. Yeah.
And when it comes to family dynamics, I feel like that's it can be a tricky area, especially when the whole family comes together. I feel like that's when a lot of times things escalate. So what would be good ways to even like set some boundaries when men that might have some like family dynamic challenges, when they are at holidays? What are some of the ways how they could practice setting those boundaries?
Well, so let's look at what boundary setting doesn't look like, or what it frequently looks like but shouldn't look like. It doesn't look like you can't behave that way because it violates my boundary, right? Our boundaries don't get to control other people's behavior because other people have boundaries and other people are just behaving the way they're able to in that moment. So, boundary setting can mean I think I think when we're with other people, if they're going to be abusive to you, you can have a boundary of I'm going to leave the room, or I don't prefer when you speak to me that way. It doesn't mean engaging back in the behavior because then it's not, that doesn't work. It's like putting fuel on the fire. So looking at setting boundaries doesn't look like you are behaving in a way that is not in my boundary. You have to be different. Honoring our own boundary means I'm going to spend 3 hours with all my family. They might squabble, they might judge each other, they might do whatever they do, but I am safe. And after 3 hours, I get to leave and go home, and I don't need to take anything they say personally because they're just stuck in their own patterns. They're just playing out their own dramas, and I am safe. I deserve my own compassion. And I take it like a spiritual practice. I'm like, you know, I had a family member who sometimes said things to me like, do you know what's wrong with your personality? Or do you know what your problem is? And I'd be like, no, please enlighten me. So they say, I think it's a good thing. You want to know what your level of consciousness is or how evolved you are? Spend a week with your family or spend 1 day with your family. And what I think is helpful is also looking at what triggers you, not in that moment, but you can take record of it. Sneak to the bathroom and leave a voice note on your phone. Take a quick note or take a mental snapshot because it can be very helpful and healing because our triggers are the portals to our own expansion and up leveling. So it can be a really spiritually or evolutionary tool to see what really triggers you when you're around the people that are the most intimately connected to you.
I had a interesting question with the strategy of focusing on what matters when it comes to family dynamics. Um, so how do you focus on what matters when you're triggered?
You don't. when you're in your own trigger, it's hard to. I mean, that's like expecting somebody who's blind to see. What you want to do is maybe take a few deep breaths, recognize you're triggered. Sometimes you can recognize right away you're triggered and you can walk away. You can take a few deep breaths. You can say, I need a moment. I'm going outside. I feel really upset right now and I need a minute to gather my thoughts, whatever it is. But if you don't notice you're triggered and you just go unconscious and reactive for a while, the minute you notice that you were triggered, celebrate your awareness. Or you can refer back to our episode all about being triggered and what to do about it. And I think we even had a trigger protocol that we were offering to people. And yeah, so it's, don't expect yourself to do that when you're triggered. Have compassion. When you're triggered, you're not in charge of your vehicle of consciousness. You've had that hostile takeover from one of your parts that's afraid or upset. And everybody has those moments. So have compassion for yourself and have compassion for other people when they're triggered and they're unconscious, because don't expect people to be in their most enlightened, authentic, logical, rational selves when they're triggered, and don't expect it of yourself either. So do whatever you need to do to help yourself in that moment, because it's probably not at the middle of Christmas dinner or holiday gathering or Hanukkah meal or whatever you're celebrating. Is probably not the best time to process your trigger in the moment, unless you have a very conscious family who likes doing that. We might do that at my family, but I don't think that's typical. So have compassion for yourself. As soon as you come back into awareness, so as soon as you're like, oh, whoa, okay, I got really upset, just remember it, write it down, and later reflect on what that trigger was here to teach you, or what weakness that was here to guide you to strengthen. And have compassion for yourself and compassion for other people, because they're going to get triggered too. And that's something we all have in common. So it's not something that should divide and separate us. In a conscious dynamic, in a conscious community, that should bring us closer together and help us realize that we're not alone and we're all in this together.
Do you have any advice when it comes to the self-care, but more so like self-care before, during that gathering, and after also, in a way, one, especially if the person that has been going to that gathering feels drained, they're just
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah. So I also get that way. I'm very socially skillful, but I sometimes end up, I thrive best when I have some decompression time after social gatherings. So a way to communicate that to my partner, or him to I, could be, I love you so much and I love spending time with you. And so that I can be my best, I need to go fill my cup. So my husband will go meditate. I'll go for a walk. Or we'll say, hey, do you mind? Yesterday he was like, do you mind if we just quietly read by ourselves? I'm like, yeah, okay, perfect. But if we frame it with like, I love you, I love spending time with you, the other person's not going to feel abandoned or rejected, or like you don't want to be around them. It's reminding them that this is how I can show up better. And men do need time to process, and that's okay. You have every right to need time to process, as long as you're communicating it and not just being like, well, that dinner was overwhelming, so I'm going to go upstairs and watch TV while you clean up and do the dishes because I need alone time and that's my boundary. That's not being conscious. That's suboptimal. That's suboptimal.
And is there like any, I'm just curious if there's like any self-care that can be done, or like create a way to approach self-care during the gatherings, or not so, I don't know, kind of, is there a way to make it slightly less hard?
Okay. Remember that what everybody else is doing, you don't have control over. So go in with curiosity rather than expectations. Like I sometimes used to go into certain gatherings, whether it be friend groups or whatever, and I'd be like, this time that person is going to presence me and validate me. Of course they're not. They never have before. Oh, that person's going to get drunk. That person better not get drunk again. They're going to. So it's approaching it with curiosity and a sense of humor rather than, again, creating that contract, that script, or that expectation that people behave differently than they are. It's dropping into acceptance. It's taking a few deep breaths and saying, not my circus, not my monkeys. However everybody else behaves is the best that they're able to do at that moment. And none of it has anything to do with me, because we often want to manage other people's emotions and manage other people's behavior and manage other people, their interactions with each other, because we don't want them to feel a certain way. Well, why is that? It's because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. So if we remind ourselves that I'm safe, no matter how other people behave, everybody gets triggered, including me. We all just want to be closer. And just being that evolutionary leader in your family, if you do have a family that has a lot of conflict or struggle or unintegrated trauma or old patterns that they have not, if they haven't done the work yet. And if you have been doing the work and they haven't, another way to look at it without turning it into superiority is like, hey, I've worked hard to get from grade 4 to grade 9. They're still in grade 4. That doesn't mean that they're terrible. It just means they haven't yet gone through those levels. So how can I support them and not feel frustrated that I'm in grade 9 and they're in grade 4? And remember that there's probably people there that are in grade 12 going, oh my God, that person's in grade 9. That's so frustrating. And levels that we don't even know about yet. So it's just keeping a sense of humor, keeping humble, and approaching people with curiosity and compassion rather than expectations or trying to manage their emotions so that you feel safe and you can avoid your own emotions. You are safe. Other people's behavior is not personal, even if they seem like they're attacking you. And people are just doing their best in any moment. And yeah.
So, kind of following along with that example that you gave, when it comes to planning ahead, especially for the most part, you know the people that will be there. You kind of have an idea what are their patterns or how they might trigger you. What are some of the ways that people listening can plan ahead, not only keeping in mind others or their typical behaviors, but also their patterns of like what you said, trying to manage others' emotions or, doing stuff like that?
I like to pep talk myself, and it doesn't look like this. Okay, Sandy, you're not going to do this or that. You're not going to take things personally. It might be writing things down. It might be reading a passage from your favorite self-help book. It might be having a call with your coach. I have a lot of clients doing that right now. Okay, Sandy, we've been working on this stuff all year. And I'm like, now is the time you take theory into being. Now is like your grad school. This is your exam time. How do you navigate that? Keeping 1 or 2 or 3 things in mind. Nothing is personal. I give other people permission to be whoever they are. And maybe taking one tool like deep breaths, something where yeah.
Okay, so moving into quite the opposite area, which is, like you said, it's quite important, or like one of the most important pieces of the holidays is the connection.
Yeah.
But what to do if you feel lonely, you feel isolated, maybe you don't, you spend that Christmas or whatever holiday by yourself.
Yeah.
How to navigate that?
Yeah. With a lot of self-compassion. Everything you feel is valid. And ask yourself if there's anybody you could reach out to. Like maybe there's a friend and you could try practicing vulnerability and saying, I'm alone over the holidays. Like, I don't know anybody mostly that I know well. I don't need people I've never met probably, but people that I know well, that if they called me and said, I'm alone over the holidays, like I'm struggling, I'd be like, great, come over. No doubt. I used to live in um, very touristy places like Banff and Canmore and Lake Louise in Alberta, Canada. which are like big tourist destinations, beautiful. It was a lot of seasonal workers. So I used to have holiday parties for I called them all the holiday orphans. Everybody that didn't have family or didn't have somewhere to go, that was something I tried to create. So you could create that in your community. You could see if there's other people that are lonely, you could, now if you have no friends and no family and nobody that you could reach out to, that's probably a good indicator that there's some changes that need to happen all year round. That might be an invitation to either do some healing or to push yourself out of your comfort zone, maybe reflect on your own behavior, things like that. But you can look at also volunteer opportunities. You can look at if there's like local meetup groups and things like that, and just practice a lot of self-compassion. A lot of people drink more or participate more in their, again, not that those are your solutions to a problem, right? The problem is not the drinking is the solution to a problem. And remembering to refer back to some of our episodes on emotional processing. So trying not to shove a bunch of beach balls underneath, because that can cause, disruption in the harmony of your body, but allowing yourself to feel your emotions, practicing vulnerability, being brave to reach out to others and say, I'm struggling, I'm alone, instead of expecting other people to miraculously solve your problems for you. And also, again, and I say this with a lot of love and compassion, if you have no friends in your life and no family and nobody likes you and nobody hangs around you and you have nobody you can reach out to, that probably means that you've had to create coping mechanisms to survive that mean you push everybody away or you lash out, and people, are having trouble experiencing your authentic self.
So with loneliness, one thing that comes in mind is that, like, similar to what you said, like wanting to avoid certain feelings or certain realizations. What would be, well, one would be how important is that self-care during that period, but also when it comes to focusing on what matters, what could be some things that the person going through this could try to focus on that might be beneficial for them?
Well, you could do self-reflection. You could watch movies that make you laugh. You could find videos that make you laugh. You could read a book that makes you laugh. You could spend time in nature. You could go for a walk. You could volunteer to walk dogs at a local shelter. You could go to a cat cafe and pet cats. You could, I think there's lots of different strategies and different things work for different people.
What if, slightly moving into the next challenge of expectations, what if, and there's like a lot of men that you work with that are like really ambitious and they want to accomplish big things. So for a lot of them, it might be that they don't prioritize holidays. Or they go through seasons when they might need to prioritize something that they're building, or it might be even intense, especially I think in business, like during holiday seasons. The question that I had is, if somebody authentically don't really care about holidays, but others expect them to care about them, how could they approach or navigate that?
Yeah, that is a really good question in the total other direction. And I can tell you, as somebody who used to feel very nostalgic about the holidays, because it was like some of the only times I remembered my family really being together. And in my mind, it was like, that's the season we can feel love for each other. But I've also been in a situation, and nowadays, where I'm like, I kind of feel like my whole life is a holiday. I don't need one day a year or a season a year to feel loved and to show love and to celebrate each other and to be close to my family or my husband. I like, same with birthdays. I'm like, I feel like every day is my birthday. And some people just might not genuinely care about it. That's okay. You don't have to care about the holiday. You would want to ask yourself, is it like this? I don't care about the holiday. Or it doesn't just not that meaningful to me. So you'd want to ask yourself, is it a shutdown coping mechanism of like, I don't care about the holidays? Because holidays when I was a kid meant pain and fighting and dad drinking and mom crying. And that's, we're not sure if that's your conditioned self or your authentic alignment that doesn't like the holidays. But if you just genuinely don't care about the holidays, but your partner does, it's about allowing both truths to be valid. And you can say, I know that the holidays are really important to you. They're not as important to me, but you're important to me. Here's what I need to get done over the holidays, but what can I do to support you? Because we want to make our partners happy, right? It's not about making other people happy at our own expense, though. And genuinely seeing other people happy will bring you joy and happiness. And if it doesn't, that's probably a sign that there's just some work to be done, or that you're making them happy without also acknowledging your wants, needs, boundaries, and values. So I think it's like a balance, but it's okay to not care about the holidays. I love, like, for instance, a few Christmases ago, I didn't grow up religious. I grew up in a very scientific family, but I'm very, what you might call spiritual, or I've had lots of religious type experiences and samadhi states. And so what made me happy was I asked like the four most important people in my life, I'm like, what do you want to do? Some years I put up a tree, some years I don't. And one of them was like, I have always wanted to have a big tree to decorate. And I was like, great, I'll have a Christmas tree decorating party. I didn't care at all if that tree went up, but I got so much pleasure out of watching people I care about doing something that brought them pleasure, and being able to facilitate for them and bring them together like that doesn't mean I have to care about if the tree goes up or not. And every year, I'm not putting a tree up this year. I don't think I did last year, but 2 years before that, I was like, I would like to have a big Christmas tree with lots of pretty lights. It's just sort of asking yourself every year, instead of what I should do, what I'm expected to do, what do I want to do? And having that open dialogue with your partner and finding not as much compromise, but win-wins. Here's how you can feel happy, I can feel happy. And, or maybe we tell the kids, hey, if we don't have to do all that stuff, we'll spend the money and we'll spend 5 days, no mom and dad, no cell phones. We'll spend 5 days in Hawaii or whatever it is. There are other things that you can do.
So to follow along with that example that you gave, what to do if, or how to navigate the expectation of having the perfect holiday?
Yeah, you're never going to have the perfect holiday. So I think in that case, it's all about expectation management. If you expect this Disney, perfectly written movie script Christmas in your head, you're going to be disappointed. If you expect the
I lost you at if you expect. You started to talk about expectations.
Okay. So if you or anybody in your family has an expectation of a perfect holiday, you're going to be disappointed. How you navigate that is expectation management. If you expect Disney holiday, you expect Hallmark movie, and you write that script for everyone in your family, and then you're disappointed, you've set yourself up to feel disappointed. If you expect your grandma to criticize your grandpa, and you expect your Uncle Harry to get drunk, and you expect your kids to be ungrateful, and you just expect people to be whoever they are, you're not going to be disappointed. It's when we create these unrealistic scripts in our mind movie or compare things to something that we can't control. All we can control is how we show up in the holidays. And if we're expecting everybody else to play a role in order to fulfill our expectation, we're going to be disappointed. So that's all down to expectation management. And I think we did an episode about that, didn't we? Approaching things with curiosity rather than expectation. Because everybody is just doing their best in the moment with however they're feeling in that moment and whatever their triggers are and whatever kind of week they had. And there is no such thing as a perfect holiday. So I think creating that expectation for ourselves causes way more suffering than it needs to.
So here's another scenario. So one is, let's say, you having that expectation, which I feel I don't want to say it's easier to navigate, but it's something that you're way more in control of because that's your expectation. How to navigate others expecting that for you have or you set up this perfect holiday?
Communication and communicating exactly the type of things I'm communicating here, like, hey, I feel, and using I statements and kind, conscious communication, like to your partner, for instance. You might be married to anybody, you might be unmarried, but whoever that is that you're communicating to, a parent, a friend, your wife, for instance, it's about communicating. I'm feeling really stressed and I feel like I'm failing or like I might not be good enough if I can't provide you the perfect holiday. But here's the thing, I don't think there's ever a perfect holiday. And making sure that what you perceive them to expect is what they expect. So you want to make sure you're not projecting, oh, they think I'm failing, they think I'm not good enough. You want to make sure that that's actually the truth, because at the end of the day, what they might care about more than anything is you sitting there, putting your phone down and asking them and connecting with them, even if that makes them uncomfortable because they're not used to you doing that. And saying to your partner, like, what would it, at the end of the day, the reason anybody would want a perfect Christmas is why? Why do you think anybody would want to create a perfect holiday?
I don't know. First thought that came to me is just like to avoid judgment or
Oh, that's a good perspective. Yeah, that could be true. Yes. Yes. So that would be creating the perfect holiday out of shame of not being good enough. That is true. That is definitely one reason. The first reason that came to me was that if we created the perfect holiday and everybody got what they wanted, we'd be happy.
Hmm.
So why not focus on what we can do to make ourselves happy now without needing our happiness to be a result of that particular perfection that doesn't exist? But you're right, it could be. You could ask yourself, am I trying to create the perfect holiday because I'm trying to prove that I'm good enough? In which case, it has nothing to do with making your partner happy or your kids happy or your family happy or your work coworkers happy or your employees happy. That's a you problem. But if you do genuinely have a wife who's like, I need this to be happy and I need that and we need a new car and the kids all need new laptops and we want this and we all have to wear matching outfits and the table has to be perfect and all that stuff, it might mean that she's struggling with perfect holiday syndrome. It might mean that she feels like she's not good enough. It might mean that you can help her and sit down and say, what matters most to me is that we're close. You don't have to be perfect. What matters to me is that we're together. Let's try this or that. So in that case, you could step in and you could be the evolutionary leader in that family dynamic. And remembering that they might be no different than you. They might be just wanting to be happy and they want connection and they think that they have to be perfect to get that. Or they might be trying to produce everything to be perfect out of shame or fear of not being good enough. And why would they care so much if they provided you, in your point, from that perspective? Why do you care if you can provide a perfect thing for your family? Why? Because at the end of the day, all of it leads down to wanting connection. That's it. Connection, approval. And it comes back down to our magnetic masculinity blueprint, our wants, needs, boundaries, and values.
So I have an interesting perspective with this. So let's say with navigating those expectations, what if there's somebody they might know it, they might not know it, but they might be in a place where they rather now try to meet everybody's expectations than face the negative emotions that might come with like setting boundaries or having those open conversations. And how to navigate that?
That is a really good question. So I don't think there's a right answer. I think it depends of honoring where you're at. And I think if you can even ask yourself that question, which one is going to be more uncomfortable for me? And I don't know because I don't know your family dynamic. I don't know how receptive your family is to boundaries. I don't know what it also depends what your core values are because you're going to be very different if your core value is freedom versus your core value is um, collaboration or your core value is keeping low conflict, peacemaker. It depends a little bit what your core value is, what your personality type is, and what you value and what you prioritize. But I think that if you can even ask yourself that question, you're already succeeding.
So, last scenario that I have is related to the time constraints, and it's similar. It's a bit opposite to the one about the person who, oh, I don't really care about holidays. But what if somebody really care? They love holidays, but for whatever reason they just don't have time, or let's say they have to be working, or there's
Yeah.
something that is constraining them to actually be able to find time or be present.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up um, most of my life with a single mother who was responsible to create our holiday, buy the presents, and work 12 to 14-hour night shifts, sometimes day shifts, sometimes night shifts at a busy intensive care unit in a hospital. And I can only now, I didn't have as much ability to reflect back then, but I reflect now how impossibly overwhelming that must have been for her. And I know that for me, all I really wanted at the end of the day was her presence. So we would sometimes do Christmas on Boxing Day, or we're going to do Christmas on the 22nd. And again, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I'm just speaking from that bias because that's the culture I grew up in. But whatever your holiday is, it doesn't have to be that it doesn't have to be that day. And there is I can think of perfect families who have perfect holidays. I'm speaking about clients who are like, yeah, we have $10 million. We have 3 properties. We go to our Christmas property on the island for Christmas. All our kids get all these presents. They're not happy. At the end of the day, what people want is your connection, your presence, your curiosity about them, your connecting with them. And that can happen any day of the year. And communicating that to them and saying, I am so busy right now, but there is nothing I'd like more than to be with you. Could we spend time on this day and this day? And this is when I have free. And then when you are home, because I also have clients that are like, I don't have time to spend with my kids. And I say, okay, let me look at your schedule. And I'm like, that is a pretty busy schedule. Then I say, can I see your phone? And I look at their phone and I go, oh, 6 hours a week on Twitter. So you have time, right? It's also about accountability of, is there a way I can clean up my schedule? And in what ways in my life am I piddling time away on things that don't matter as much as connection?
All right. So, oh, actually, before I also have a question on, let's say if somebody who wants to be present, they can't attend, how to communicate that or what would be good ways to communicate it?
That's a hard one. I mean, try in the future to prioritize that, even if you can't prioritize it on Hanukkah or the Hanukkah season or over the Christmas season or over whatever holiday you celebrate, whatever time of year. I think regardless of what religion or non-religion you are, people do have that time of year off, whether that's proper or not. I think I don't, it's not my job to decide. Um, but it's then when can you? And acknowledging them and saying, I wish I was there with you, but don't just keep saying, I wish I was there with you and then not showing up. Say, I wish I was there with you. Here's when I'm going to show up and then show up.
All right, so that's the navigating holiday stress. Anything you want to
Yeah.
add?
No, we just want to thank everybody who, this might be your first time listening, or you might be one of our regular listeners. We just want to thank all of you. And I just want to remind all men out there, or anybody who's listening to this because they have a man in their life that they want to support, you're not in this alone. You are helping us evolve out of the emotional dark ages. Your feelings matter, and we just have so much compassion for you, and we're here for you. And together we heal, grow, and rise out of the emotional dark ages and help you step into your most magnetic, empowered, authentic, gorgeous version of divine masculine, whatever that looks like for you. And happy holidays, whatever that means to you.
I will see you next week, which will also be next year.
Fun. We'll see you next year. Bye for now.